Survivors ready. Go!
Travis spoken.
Boston Rob and Amber are gonna do it.
This is a business trip, as I like to say.
You Brad Culpepper.
I'm tired of you and the fucking chicken.
You can call me the puppet master. They can be my little puppets.
It's not like you're making me deal with the devil here. You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
We got enough rocks here, too. We could build a pretty decent shelter just using rocks.
I'm supposed to talk glamour to you.
Direct from Hobart, it's time for the only survival podcast in Australia dedicated to Survivor, bringing you today's interviews, episodes, and opinions from the greatest reality show on the planet. It's Survivor Oz, and here's your host.
Come in, survivors. Get your first look at the new Ozlet tribe. Only Kaoh and Ryan remain. I'm Kaoh Brandon, and I'm your host tonight. I'll be unfiltered, uncompromising, and we'll pick apart the 6th episode of Survivor Kaoh Rong. And to share this experience, I have a man from South Australia. And if the Ozlets were ever a tribe on Survivor, this man would be the tie to my Scott. Definitely a bromance, and my core alliance, Ryan Brink. How are you?
Kaoh, thank you so much for having me today on the Ozlet show. It's my debut episode here today, so excited to be on finally, and excited to talk about this season.
And how are you enjoying the season, Ryan?
I've got to say, I came in with really low expectations. I talked about this before, we kind of judge Survivor by the Jeff gauge. So if Jeff says the season's going to be fantastic, we usually think, oh, shit, maybe not so good. But he came in a little bit underwhelmed this season, so we thought maybe it's not going to be so great, but I've been pleasantly surprised. It's been a really interesting season so far. And, 6 episodes in, it still feels pretty fresh to me, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm very much in a similar boat to you. I think, I don't know what it is, and I guess you're right, the Jeff gauge, I've never heard that term, but yeah, it's, I think a lot of people, and just hearing the feedback from a lot of fans and other podcasts and Twitter and stuff, I think a lot of people are really enjoying this season, and maybe a little bit is because it is so good and it has, had so many different dynamics, so many great characters. You look at Ty and Debbie, just two off the top of my head that have played a big role, and then I guess it's just the way Jeff and everyone at CBS and that advertised it. It was very low key, so I think there was that buzz around that it was going to be a pretty average season. Look, 6 episodes in, I've really, really enjoyed it. Is it probably in my top 10? Probably, but look, it could go downhill very quickly, so maybe that's why it hasn't been talked about. I've enjoyed it more than Cambodia, to be honest. So, I can't speak more highly enough of this season so far. So 6 episodes in, if the casual fan or someone wanted to get on board and watch Survivor, I'd be definitely telling them to watch this season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I reckon if you've got someone, and I know your wife watches Survivor, my wife watches Survivor, and they're not huge fans, but I think a real big hallmark for a season is when they kind of relate to characters. And I know this season, watching with my wife, she's actually getting to know characters. She likes characters, where I guess last season with Cambodia, it's one of those seasons where it's so strategic. It's that game is for the diehards, and it was fantastic. But on the flip side, this season here has been really interesting. And just looking at the people who've already gone from the game, there are so many great players who didn't make the merge this season, who you think, well, if there's going to be a second chance season sometime down the track, I would love to see some of these characters come back.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, Anna going home last week, did we see that much of her? When you really break it down, probably not, but she was still, apart from Caleb and Ty, definitely the most viewed beauty and seemed to be the most in control of her tribe, or at least in a really, really strong position. And look, people... a lot of famous podcast hosts, including our own Ben Waterworth, they all sort of had Anna as a winner pick. So, yeah, you're right. Her going out fifth. Yeah, she's one along with a couple that you could see maybe coming back.
Yeah, most definitely. I know Ben did have Anna, and just a shout out to Ben. I know he's training really hard, 3 days a week now for Australian Survivor, which he'll be heading off to Samoa very shortly. So best of luck, Ben. Just on a side note, like my pick for this season was Liz, and to see Liz go out so early, like I was shocked. Like to see Liz, Anna, even Caleb, who really was fantastic this season, to go so early. All three of those people could have been winners after episode 1, and all three are already out the game. So yeah, it's been a really interesting, really dynamic season so far.
So I guess that kind of brings us to a sort of a different point that we spoke about off air. Like, so we've seen these sort of fairly big characters that we're getting a decent edit that we thought, geez, this could be a winner or this could be a winner. They're all gone. And now the people that have been fairly quiet got a lot of airtime. So what are your thoughts on that, Ryan, in regards to sort of Nick, Joe, Aubrey?
That's one of the reasons I really love this episode in particular, because we had Michelle and Nick both have 6 confessionals. Aubrey had 5, Joe had 4, so I kind of felt like we were seeing players who had really had invisible edits the last few episodes really shine this episode, so that's one thing I really liked about it. And I like seeing some of these characters, like especially Michelle and Nick, and seeing their dynamic. We're seeing a lot on these tribes where there's 2 members from their original Brains, Brawn, or Beauty, and they've got that connection. But with Michelle and Nick, we just don't feel like there's been that connection at all through the game. So I'm interested to see how that's going to progress through. And players like Joe, like I know I was coming on Twitter before, but his scene during the episode with Peter was so fantastic. I know we'll talk about that later, but just watching someone like Joe out there, and just to remember, this guy is 72 years old, and he is out in Survivor, and he's made it pretty much to the merge, so he's got to be up there as for an older contestant. He's doing fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I actually liked it. Was refreshing to actually see someone really go up and confront someone and put them on the spot. I mean, look, it does happen in Survivor, but just this no ifs or buts. Just give me a straight answer, yes or no. Have you been talking about voting me out, or what? Words to that effect. And absolutely, like the blowtorch was applied to Peter Quicksmart. And I just think he really played it really badly. Again, a lot of Survivor players probably don't think they're going to get confronted like that. So they're probably, in fairness to Peter too, like he probably just, again, wasn't expecting it, and also probably thought that maybe someone had actually told Joe instead of Joe just having sort of a feeling or a gut feel. So, yeah, Peter was definitely on the back foot on that one. And I actually find it funny, though. What were your thoughts on the way Joe came around to keeping Peter later? Because I felt that was quite funny that, in the confessional after he spoke, he was like, if people are dancing around the question, they're being evasive and they're not being truthful. And then he said, he's a cancer to the group. He needs to go. And then a quick chat to Aubrey, and all of a sudden it's, let's mend the fence and let's get over it and we'll get rid of Julia. What did you think about that?
To me, Joe is just, like, not just because he's 72, but he's an old school type of player. Like, he just has that mentality where, he wants to stick core to his core alliance, and I just feel like he's spoken to Aubrey, he's done the numbers, he understands that he's in a better position right now to remain with the 3 brains. So for him, he's going to stick true to his word. His word is probably what's really important to him in real life. It's what's really important to him in the game. He's got an alliance with Aubrey. He said, this is my word, this is what we're going to do. He's made his word at the moment to Peter, so I believe he just decided, I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah. I just find Joe really fascinating. You're right. I mean, it's not often we see a person of Joe's age play Survivor anymore. I think there's obviously insurance reasons for having people of a particular age. And that's no disrespect to older people, but they obviously have to be fairly fit and look after themselves to just get on a season. Because the reality is you can't have them, or you don't want anything unfortunate to happen. And I think CBS or Probes burn out all the production at Survivor wouldn't want anything bad to happen. So Joe's an interesting one because I agree. I think he's got a high level of integrity. He's honest, but I think he wants to stick to his guns. And if he says something, he doesn't want to flip flop and muck around. He just wants to go, let's make a decision and we're sticking with it. So that's what makes him interesting, because he obviously didn't want to change it, tribal cancel his vote. And even when Aubrey started getting wishy-washy, he wasn't really impressed with that. And I think I like him because he seems to... He's letting Aubrey call the shots, but I think he's adding that touch of logic and rationale to each decision, though. Like, he's like, let's do what you want to do, but he's still putting his case forward a bit, but he's not being pushy, but he's... Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, to me, Jo is that central figure. Like, Aubrey's someone who's a bit spacey. She buzzes around, goes around. Jo's like that pillar that she just floats around. So she needs that stability. It's that yin and yang. Like,
yep.
For Aubrey, she needs someone who's stable to keep her centered, to keep her on track, because she is so neurotic. And there was that scene where he points that out. But, like, my favorite quote of the night was from Jo, and he said, "I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to tell me straight up. Are you telling people, take Jo out? And if you lie right now, I'm telling you, you're done." I love that. Like, straight to Peter, straight and honest. I know we were just talking about it then, but to me, that's, like, we don't see that in Survivor anymore. We don't see anyone just go straight up and be like, you know, you're done if you're not telling me the truth. It's so refreshing to see in a season.
Couldn't agree with you more. Okay, so what were your thoughts going across to the other tribe, Nick and Debbie, and this whole sort of flirting, them playing off each other? Who do you think came out on top?
Debbie clearly came out on top. Debbie's fantastic. Like, the way Debbie is playing not only Nick, but she's playing everyone in this game. Like, to me, Debbie couldn't play this game a second time, because I think after watching Debbie's game, you'll know what she's doing. But the first time out, she's one of these players that can go under the radar while still being on top of the radar, if that makes any sense, because she's so dynamic, she's so intriguing, she has all these different quirks. Like, she plays up this lovable character, but in her mind, she's processing everything she does is calculated, but she comes across as just this lovely person who is just so left of center, so quirky, that people aren't threatened by her.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying, but I actually thought it was a little bit, you know, listening to both their confessionals, I think it was almost a 0-0 draw. I think they were both playing each other a bit, and, you know, the flirty card or whatever, just building up that relationship. But I think they're both aware of each other, and I think Nick said a couple of things that I felt like I actually think, compared to a lot of the other things he has in the game, I actually thought he had a fairly good read on Deb. And so I don't know how that situation's going to go further down the line, but I think they both have worked each other out. It's just Nick probably hasn't worked everyone else out in the tribe, and nobody else in the tribe has worked out Deb. But I think both of those two somehow they get each other, if that means but they don't realise each other get each other. They both think, you know, they've...
Yeah, I think Nick knows that Debbie's playing it up a bit, but I don't think he knows to the extent that she's playing it up. So I still think Debbie's got the upper hand. Maybe I'll give it 1-0, but I still think Nick has an understanding of his situation in the game, and he knows that his best course of action is to play up to this lady who is obviously flirting with him. So he's playing that up, he's flirting back.
Now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, something that I sort of had to do a double take at, and my partner did a double take, and we had to do a rewind, and it has been pretty big on social media in the last 24 to 36 hours, or whenever the episode went to air. I've modelled on and off for years and years. What have you got to say about that, Ryan?
Well, clearly she's definitely modelled on and off for years and years, because underneath her name on the Survivor episode, it said part-time model. So clearly she's always been a part-time model for a long time. Like, Debbie to me is fantastic, and we know that this is true. So Debbie has been a model, and I was shocked. Like, watching the episode, I thought, okay, this is one of Debbie's stories, just like Coach. This is Coach 2.0. Debbie's been a model. Excellent. And look, I know she's older now, but you could see that she would have been, you know, pretty attractive when she was younger. So it's not fully discountable, but coming out of the episode and seeing on social media that there actually are pictures of her being a model, I think it's fantastic, because now it makes me think of all the other things she's spoken about being since she's been on the show. Has she actually done these things as well?
Yeah, it is funny, because she's definitely Coach on steroids. I mean, there's a believability, I think, to a lot of the stuff she says, but how much of it is actually true or an exaggeration is the question, I guess. I think there probably is a little bit of truth to everything she says. It's just whether some things are, expanded upon, or the lies become a little bit bigger, or she just exaggerates it, or whatever. Yeah, I find it funny that editing are definitely playing a bit of a game by having all the different occupations every time she has a confessional. I think that's quite funny.
Yeah, like I don't know, but I know in my real life I've got a friend, and it's everything he says I just take by half because it's always elaborated. I think that there are just people out there who do, I don't know, big note or self note things that they've done. I think she probably has done a lot of these things. She's probably been, a part-time trainer. She's been a part-time model. She's released turtles into the ocean. All these things that she says she's done, but whether they've been proper jobs or not, who knows? But I love Debbie. So to me, Debbie has been one of the most fascinating characters. That's for Kristen, the word fascinating characters this season. To me, I really have loved her character type, and to be honest, we haven't really seen a Debbie in a while, so I'm really intrigued by the type of personality that she has and that she's bringing to the show.
Yeah, I think we should have a little bit of a shout out to Kristen as well. She said we've got to make sure we bring up the modelling shots and stuff like that. And she did definitely want to be on this podcast, but she had to get her beauty sleep, I'm imagining. So couldn't be here. So she said we have to, otherwise she'd be very angry if we didn't mention it. So that probably takes us to our next point, the challenge. What do you think about the challenge? Because I'll just go on record as saying that I've heard a bit of social media, and I'm pretty sure it was on another podcast. Someone had asked the question: is it fair to have a reward/immunity challenge have a part of it that really suits a particular person? In that being Scott, an NBA or ex-NBA basketballer, with throwing buoys into a basket. And we had that with Cliff Robinson in Brains versus Brawn the first time around. I mean, what are your thoughts on that challenge?
Look, I actually like the challenge, and you're right. This challenge was a modification of the one in Kaoh, where Cliff Robinson and Spencer were shooting the baskets. So I think it was the one where Jatia was in the water and she couldn't get the buoys back. That was a good episode.
They were on the pontoon and they were there.
So this episode obviously was a modification of that. Just to start off on the challenge, I really love that Aubrey has taken a lead role in a lot of these water challenges. Like, you look at her and you don't think that she's someone who'd be good in the water, but she might not be the quickest swimmer, but she's really good at diving. She was able to get those buoys out really quickly compared to Michelle on the other side. Got the buoys out, they're back on the beach. Scott and Nick are competing. Do I think it's unfair that they're competing in a shooting challenge, considering you have a former basketballer? We all have different life skills. That's like saying, when we get to other challenges like post-merge, where someone might have better endurance than someone else, someone might be better at puzzles. These things happen. Not everyone has the same skill set. You can't change or modify tasks to suit everyone, so I wasn't 100% against it. I didn't mind it, and to be honest, like in the NBA anyway, Scott wasn't a shooter. He was a center, and center was mainly for blocking. So even though he would have good shooting practice for 15 years of his career, I still like that competition. And I was really impressed with Nick because Nick kept it up the whole time. He was very close. He was in front at one stage and nearly snatched it.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to get bogged down talking about a reward challenge too long anyway, but I actually find it interesting that people sort of say that. And look, I know it can come across, it works out perfect for Scott because he's an NBA player, that challenge is built for him and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't buy into that. I think, those sort of challenges have always sort of existed in that form, and they haven't always had NBA players.
So, in the last season, though, we saw someone like Stephen Fishback, who we know is fantastic at puzzles. Should we not have puzzles because he's a terrific puzzle creator or finisher? I just think there are certain skills that people are going to have, and you just can't change just to suit every single person.
Yeah, I know, I agree. I just think, I do sort of find it interesting how different challenges over the years have been sort of similar yet run differently from season to season. And I was actually surprised even that the fact that it came down to a Scott versus Nick battle. Like, why wouldn't there be multiple players in the tribe that are allowed to shoot? Like, why does... I don't know. I guess that's the way they set the challenge up, and that's, you know, you strategize. So everyone knew Scott was going to be doing that portion of the challenge. But I sort of find it interesting. Even the buoy, you know, the release of the buoys, like you said, Aubrey and Michelle going down. But then... You know, why did we have to wait till the release of the buoys? Why? I don't know. I just think the challenge was a little bit... I don't know. I just didn't rub me the right way. I just thought they could have done it better, or it could have been more interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually quite liked the challenge. I thought it was really fascinating because I liked that you had 1-on-1 straight away. So you had Aubrey and Michelle competing to who could get it out first, undo the knots and pull it out. But like, I think there's certain limitations about what they can do, and like, this wasn't an immunity challenge; it was a reward challenge. Yeah. For me, it was fine. Like, I'm not a big fan of reward challenges anyway. I just don't like reward challenges in general. I just think that's a waste of time you could spend on actual dynamics in a tribe. And like, how long did this actual reward challenge go for in the episode? It seemed like it went for ages. I haven't done a timestamp on it, but it was a big proportion of the episode. At least 8 minutes, I'd say. So I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of reward challenges in general, but the challenge itself, I didn't mind.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, I didn't hate it, but I just think sometimes they, you know, the way it's just set up, like even the fact that they had to load all the balls into those sort of into the
those racks.
Into the racks, that's a good word. Into the racks, and then before he could start shooting. Now, why can't they make it like, you know, we had early in the season where they had the choice of to do either the puzzle or the balancing thing. Why couldn't they just say, you know what, it's your choice. You can start shooting balls whenever, but the problem is, you know, you don't have all your buoys up on the beach, so you have to wait for the balls to come to you, kind of thing. So I don't know. I don't know. I sometimes want them to actually vary them up a bit and give a bit more choice, like more risk versus reward type scenarios. And I don't know. I thought that could have been a challenge that could have been more interesting. But having said that, the result was really good. Like I said, Nick hit the front when they were well behind, and it looked like he was going to beat an NBA championship winner. And just fell short. Just fell short.
Yeah, it was good. I kind of felt like, did you see how they had to run back and then get the buoy and then shoot it? They could have had someone at the rack, I don't know, passing them to the person or something. Like, that could have been part of the challenge, but I don't know. Yeah, I guess I get your point where there wasn't a lot of parts where everyone was involved. There was only really like individual parts for certain people. So overall, it was a fine reward challenge, but reward challenges in general, get rid of them, scrap them. Australian Survivor, don't have them.
Can I ask you a fun? This is going to be a bit weird or a bit funny. In regards to the reward challenge too. Now, we often see a nice spread, and Jeff says all the fixings: chicken, corn, mashed potato, all that sort of stuff. There's always chicken and stuff like that. Did you notice? And he said there was meats, and I think there was cold meats. But for the first time, I reckon ever, I've heard there was tuna salad. Like, I'm sure it has happened before, but it's not very. It's not a normal staple of Survivor rewards, is it?
No, not really. Maybe there's some dietary requirements on that tribe that we don't know about. I don't know. Pescatarian, who knows?
Well, I'd be happy because it's still good protein. But I just thought, to me, that just seemed a bit weird because there's always chicken and there's always a barbecue and red meat or something. And it just seemed just very different to me because it just jumped out. So I just thought that was a one sort of funny little.
Yeah, well, when they went back to camp, they just had sandwiches. So, like, yeah, it's great. They had sandwiches, but you'd love to, like, hoe into a chicken or, you know, something that was a bit more filling.
So, Ryan, Julia fills in for or joins the tribe replacing Anna. She's pretty much the bottom of the totem pole, and it seems that way. Aubrey and Joe and Peter. Well, the initial talk is it's Julia, straight up. She's got a lot of ground to make up. How do you reckon she did making up ground within your tribe?
Just before we start that even, like, what day are we up to, Cable?
I don't know.
maybe like 15, 16 or something. Do you think it's unfair that they bring in a brand new player after 15 days to the game?
Yeah, I think it's not really fair. I mean, they brought her in all dirty and stuff, but I mean, apart from that, really.
After Pearl Islands, I thought we had got rid of those kind of twists. But yeah, look, seriously, I think that she actually came in and played pretty well. Like, if you're Julia walking back and you're seeing like one of your closest allies and Anna gone from the game, and you're taking her spot, you're thinking, oh, shit, like you're in a pretty hard position. But she's come onto this tribe. I think that she's probably less intimidating than Anna probably comes across. So I like that she just played it down. She was open to listening to Peter go on about how, he's on the bottom of their tribe, of the Brain Alliance, listening to him. And I feel like the shift had been made in that tribe, and maybe we didn't see something, but there was definitely a chasm between Peter and Aubrey and Joe, which was pretty evident from the beginning. So I don't know. I'm happy that Julia got some airtime today because we hadn't seen a lot of her, pretty much any of her. So to see more airtime from Julia, pleased, and I think she played it really well.
Yeah, I think she was. Yeah, I mean, look, we don't see everything, obviously, but I felt like she seemed to be really receptive to everyone, but she was happy to just listen, learn, gain information. It wasn't all about her talking or pleading her case. It was just all about just being there, listening to what was being said, being happy to feel like she might not be the name that's mentioned as a potential boot. So I think definitely that before they got to immunity, I think she definitely did the best she could without scheming or plotting too much.
Look, I don't think she's much of a plotter and schemer. I think naturally she is young. She's 19 years old, but I think she's a generally nice person as well. I think she's very intelligent, which has come across in this episode. So that was really fantastic. I think her social awareness is quite good as well. So I like that she came in. She could spot that there was divisions within the tribe, and she's gone away straight away. I think it was really well played by Ty and Scott to bring her in straight away as well, make her feel comfortable with them, knowing that she had that core two other players that she could go to. So I was really pleased with the way that all three of them actually played this game in this episode.
Yeah, no, I couldn't speak more highly of her. I mean, you're right. We've barely seen her for 15 days, so it's hard to get a good read on someone like that, especially if they're like the little puppy dog of Anna and they don't say much. So, for her to finally sort of step out of that Anna's shadow and have a bit of a role and play her part was, it's good to see. Look, and we've already said it in this episode, seeing, Aubrey and Joe and Michelle and Nick more has been, really good. And Julia had a bit of a time in the sun as well. So that was good.
Well, look, just quickly, I've got up the confessional counts for the season. So we've had 6 episodes so far. Julia in the first episode had 1, second episode 1. Then for the next 2 episodes had 0, 1 in the last episode, and she's had 3 this week. So she's only had 6 in total. She's the least in terms of confessionals compared to anyone else still in the game. So she's had pretty much no confessional count. The next closest, lowest to her is Joe with 8. So she's been someone who's really been invisible. And I guess because she was on that beauty tribe to start off with, and we really didn't see much on the beauty tribe apart from Ty and Caleb, that she really hasn't had a chance to shine. So maybe as we get to close to emerge, she might be someone who make a really strong emphasis in this game.
Okay, so we're going to go over to Chandler.
Great.
And Debbie pulls Michelle aside and she starts talking to her about her options. And Michelle's talking about what her best option might be. And Debbie decides to throw out Jason's name. I don't care for him much, and I really want a woman to win. So, I mean, even that, like hearing the fact that Debbie is building a relationship with Michelle that we so far hadn't seen any relationship between those two. Were you surprised that she would even throw a name out like Jason?
I'm a little surprised because last week we saw her with Sydney saying that I want a woman to win using the same strategy, which is fantastic. And so obviously if she's going against Jason, she's going against Sydney. So I was a little interested to see her do that. But from Debbie's point of view, I think it again emphasizes how well she's playing the game, that she's building those relationships on a personal level. She's told Michelle straight away that this is someone that I don't like who is on the opposing side to her. And she's also said that she would like a woman to win. So she's emphasizing that bond, and she's playing up probably the perception that people have of Debbie out there. I think that's something that she's really good at, is playing up what others perceive her to be, not what she actually is.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how that all plays out, because we can sort of see, after, like last week's episode, we saw Braun probably within that tribe at Chandler, Braun kind of in the power position with Jason and Sydney, sort of, both groups sort of coming to them, looking for their vote or to solidify a four-person alliance. So, leading into this episode, I thought we would see more of Jason and Sydney, which I believe we saw none of. So it was just interesting to sort of see the other side of the coin where, you've got your brains and potentially beauties getting together. So it will be, to use one of your words, fascinating to see how that sort of plays out in the coming weeks, or going into the merge for that matter.
Yeah, most definitely.
So Ryan, before the challenge, immunity challenge, we see Peter go to Scott, and he says, "I'm a free agent," and which is very apt, seeing that he was, speaking to an ex-NBA player who played for 5 different teams, and he's trying to lay down, look, I'm here for whatever vote you sort of need. I want to get rid of Aubrey. I want to get rid of Joe. And Scott seems pretty receptive to that. He's listening. I think he, doesn't fully trust Peter, but he's willing to listen and willing to potentially work with him. And that sort of leads back into Joe confronting Peter later on. But what are your thoughts of Peter trying, over scheming? Because we see that that's something that in the episode, Aubrey and Joe see that firstly he'd been speaking to Julia, then he's walking off with Scott. Do you think that's where a lot of the trust, they already had trust issues with Peter? Do you really think that was like the last straw, the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back?
I think for someone like Joe, integrity and honesty is very strong. So when he sees Peter walking off with someone like Scott, or he sees Peter in the water with Julia, he starts to ask questions. What is he doing? And we know that after seeing 32 seasons of Survivor, that your neuroses can get pretty high throughout the season. And for him, he's probably just starting to really doubt whether Peter's there for him. And I think Peter as well, on the flip side, he's seeing the room, he's evaluating what's going on, and he can see that maybe he doesn't really have a strong bond with either Joe or Aubrey. So what is the next move to make? Well, the next move to make is actually to talk to the other people on the tribe and see, we're getting close to a merge. This might be the ideal time to make a move, switch over to these other 3 players. I know that I'll be safe. We'll have 4 over 2. We'll get out Joe. We'll get out Aubrey in the next vote, and then he'll go to the merge feeling more comfortable. What we've seen, however, is that didn't play out, and we saw that really strong distrust between Joe and Peter come to the surface, and we had that scene which we talked about earlier about how Joe used his FBI skills on Peter to see whether he was being trustworthy, and to be honest, Peter couldn't handle the heat. Joe put him under pretty intense pressure, and Peter was just dancing around the question. He didn't say with a straight response, yes or no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't begrudge Peter for doing what he was doing. I mean, sometimes I think you have to talk to people. You have to create relationships. And I think he just probably was doing that and trying to strengthen his position and give himself more options. But the problem was he probably just made it either too obvious, or Joe and Aubrey were, they're always sort of seeming like on screen, they're always together. So, in front of them, you've just got to sort of maybe, go into the bush more or something. I just think he had to try and put himself in a better position by making it less obvious, pretty much.
Yeah, he had to play it differently. He was too obvious, and I just don't think that throughout the game we've seen Peter not play as well as maybe he assumes he's playing.
Yeah. I think, what are your thoughts on Peter? I think he's had a couple of strong episodes, but then he's also had a couple of bad episodes. Overall.
Yeah, look, I think overall, and I know you and I have both talked about this off this podcast, and we've spoken about how, to me, Peter is someone who I just don't know how big of a fan he was prior to being cast on Survivor. Like, when in your pre-game you're talking about survivors that you compare yourself to, and he's talking about Pete from the Philippines, to me, that means you've just Googled Survivor Pete and you've come up with this Pete. So I just don't think that he is someone that maybe has an innate knowledge of the game. He's a very smart person, clearly. To be an ER doctor, you have to have quite an amount of intelligence, but I guess maybe those interpersonal skills that you need in a very social game like Survivor, he may just not possess.
Yeah. And the fact that so many players have said he's arrogant, that says a lot. And I think that's one thing that people just can't stand, people that are overly arrogant. And I think if Ty's saying you're arrogant, and you're in a bit of strife.
Yeah, I just don't think he has a lot of humility. I think that's the biggest part. Maybe not just arrogant, maybe he just doesn't know how to show humility, and that's been his downfall, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's go to the immunity challenge. And, what did you think about this challenge?
The immunity challenge was really interesting because, I guess it's one of these obstacle courses where you need to use both strength and brains. I found the first part really interesting where you have to go over the net, and, there was the two tribes that used different strategies, which was interesting. One pulled up. I guess if you have someone who's 7 foot, it's easier to try and, just pull people up, but to get Scott up on that challenge was pretty amazing because he's a big guy, and you can imagine he's 300 pounds, so he's a big lad. To get him up over and onto that thing was really good. The end of it, the stacking, I didn't think that they were as heavy as they were portrayed, and seeing it fall and hit Joe on the head and clearly be quite heavy, these actual cubes that they had, I don't know why they needed to use cubes that were so heavy, but they clearly did. Maybe because they need to stack them so high, but I just think that sometimes we overdo it with the height that we make these immunity challenge. Maybe you didn't have to go as high as they did, but overall I thought it was a fine immunity challenge. I felt like it was pretty close throughout, but I don't know. I think it's one of these ones that takes a bit of luck as well, and unfortunately the same tribe lost again.
Yeah, it's funny you say about the heavy blocks. I sort of get probably they were heavy to stay in that netting, and that they would have to use all their might to push them out with those sticks that they had. But then I agree with you. I sort of think, why would you have stuff stacked so high where if it does fall, it can really hurt somebody? And we had it with, Cambodia last year with the blindfolded thing where they had to get those really big pieces and they were really heavy, and Jeff kept telling them they were heavy. But, we had Jeff Varner get injured, and Spencer, how he didn't get his leg broken is beyond me. But
that was one of the worst scenes I've seen in Survivor in a long time. I honestly thought he broke his leg. That was just horrendous.
And so for me, I just don't understand why. Look, I agree with you. It's a hard one because they have to, if they want to stack it so high and not necessarily have it blown over by the wind, they're going to have some weight to some things. But sometimes I think, have they not thought these challenges through enough? I know they run them with the Dream Teamers, but sometimes you got to think: is it firstly exciting for TV, but is it safe, or is it too much risk attached to it?
Yeah, especially when we're moving into a more litigious society where anything that happens, people are suing over. If someone like Joe had seriously hurt himself and suffered a concussion, CBS could have been in all kinds of damages. I know they sign waivers about all this stuff, but I don't know. To me, they need to just think about some of the challenges they design and think about the actual possibility that people can get hurt in them. And to be honest, I watch Survivor for people to do well in challenges. I don't watch it for people to get hurt. And we had a couple of episodes ago, episode 4, we had all those people who got really dehydrated, digging in the sand for over an hour on a really, really, really hot day. To me, it's just, I that wasn't appealing to me as a viewer anyway, watching people dig. So I just think that maybe they need to consider how they, I don't know, structure some of these challenges.
Yeah. I think even the, I kind of like the concept of they had to think, and, you had Peter have their strategy of stacking the blocks, then trying to slide the bigger blocks in under with Scott lifting. So that was an interesting strategy. Then the other team realised, oh, no, it's pretty high. And I think Deb got on Nick's shoulders maybe. But even that, I mean, then, there was a panic and then Ty's getting on the shoulders of Scott. But there's a part where I think Gondol lost a few of their blocks but then started restacking, and then Chandler did the same thing, and Deb's up on shoulders. And even then, some of the blocks blew down, just missed them. But you sort of think, well, anyone trying to hold Debbie up, they have to hold her up. What are they going to do? Just let go of her to miss a falling block? I mean, I don't know. I just think if you can avoid challenges that are risky, to players' health, then you probably wouldn't do them, would you?
Yeah, exactly. And there's plenty of challenges they can do in the water where they still look visually appealing, where you don't have these kind of issues that go on. But again, I'm not a huge, to me, when I watch Survivor, I like immunity challenges. I like them if they're innovative and fun to watch. Like last year we watched that reward challenge with Stephen Fishback one where they're running with the torches at night. That was fantastic. But I don't know, sometimes some of these challenges are just a bit repetitive, and I don't know. They could have done something a bit different, which was a bit more safe, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we have Gondol losing immunity for the second time. We go back to camp, and there's a little bit of hustling here and there. There's a little bit of wavering from Aubrey once she's told of potential Peter sort of blindside. So, I mean, talk me through that, Ryan. What do you think? Because I thought she kind of played it well. She didn't want to show all her cards, but how was she to know whether Julia, Scott, and Ty are telling her something just to get what they want?
Yeah, I didn't know how Aubrey was going to play this. To me, if I'm in Aubrey's situation and I know that it's likely to be a 3-3 switch, are they just telling me that it's going to be, someone else and trying to get me to flip my vote so it's a 3-2-1 vote? That's what was going through my head at the time. So I think she played it well for a part, but I don't like her taking it to tribal council and then changing her mind. I think she needed to, I think she just needed to make a decision one way or the other. But to me, I think she was also very scared of going to rocks. She's someone who is very neurotic, and she reminds me of myself a lot if I was playing Survivor. And I don't know, I think I would be frightened of going to rocks, and I think that's something for her where she hasn't made the merge yet. Her probably goal is to make the merge, and to go home so close to getting to the merge on a rock, to me that would be really disappointing.
Yeah.
Especially when it's for someone, sorry, just to cut off.
Yeah.
And especially if it's someone like Peter as well, who she doesn't have a strong bond with. If it was a really a core alliance member that she knew that she needed longer in the game, sure, you might go on a limb for that kind of person. But for Peter, who she doesn't have that strong relationship with, I kind of get it why she would just decide, it's not worth it. Let's just go over the numbers for today, and we're getting close to a merger anyway. Hopefully it's soon, and she'll be safe.
Yeah. Look, it's funny because, I've heard a few different things in relation to it, whether she played it well. I think there was things she could have done maybe a little bit better, but I didn't mind the way she played it. You've got to try and put yourself in her shoes, and I think that's what I don't like when people get too negative, like, oh, she made a mistake and she didn't do this well, or she didn't do that. She should have told this. You've got to try and put yourself in that player's shoes and how they're thinking and what they're hearing, what they're being told, and what's their best option or what they think is the best moving them forward. And I think sometimes even as viewers, we forget that ourselves. Like, we just see the bigger picture, or we have the luxury of having other information that those players didn't at the time. So I found it really interesting, when that, Ty and that approached her and told her, but then she sort of walked off and said thanks for the info, but then they were sort of standing around like, okay, is she, like, the fact that they had no idea what she was going to do was, I think it was kind of fascinating and funny at the same time, because it kind of put them in a hard spot, because then they're like, well, we don't know well, we've told her this, but we don't know what she's going to do. And that almost made Julia 100% go home, because then Scott and Ty were like, well, maybe we just stick with what's happening because we don't know. She hasn't given us any feedback. So,
yeah.
Let's
go with the original plan.
Yeah, and I just found it interesting, and Ty's just looking at Scott like, I don't know what we're doing now because Aubrey hasn't given us a yes, no, or even a maybe. Like, it's just, we don't know. Yeah, it's just, but then there's a part of me go, well, why didn't Peter make a bigger play to say, I'll go with you guys and let's get rid of Joe or Aubrey?
Again, I just don't think he knows the game that well. I just don't think he's much of a super fan. I just don't think he knows the game. Like, we're seeing it at Tribal Council, he can see all this going around him. He's just sitting there like, Jeff, I can see that lots of stuff's going on. He didn't actually decide to make a move. So, to me, Peter cost him this week. He's the one who eliminated himself by not playing the game.
Yeah. But I think even, sorry to backtrack a bit, but even the initial discussion when there was a discussion where Scott went to Peter and Peter was in the hammock, and it was obviously, probably half an hour, 45 minutes before Tribal, something along in that ballpark. And Scott said, oh, so we're going to have a chat. Do you want to come and have a chat? And Peter said, oh, no. And he's like looking around, I think scared that Joe's going to catch him talking to Scott. And he's like, no, I'm just going to stick with, we're going to vote Julia. And then Scott sort of walks away and then says in the confessional that he doesn't, obviously says, Peter's all BS and he's just put on this veneer and stuff like that. So, and that led into, Julia, I think, really stepping up and going, you know what, we're not going to be able to work with Peter. We can get rid of him. Joe's not going to falter. Let's go to Aubrey. And I mean, she had to save her skin. So I have to give her a pat on the back that it was more her identifying that Aubrey was the one that they could get to flip. They sort of thought, well, Joe's a loyal kind of guy. He ain't going to flip. So let's work on Aubrey. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Oh, no, 100%. 100% agree. Aubrey is neurotic. She wants to protect herself. Joe, on the other hand, is like we've said the whole time. He's, in his soul, he is just someone who is very conservative. He made a plan. He's sticking to it. Like, there's no ifs or buts. This is the plan. I'm sticking to the plan. That's what I'm doing. And for Aubrey, she's wanting to protect herself, so she's decided to make the right call for her. I'm interested to see the start of the next episode and them back on the beach, Joe and Aubrey, that is, and how that talk's going to go, because I feel like Joe's someone who can, and we've seen, can take things a bit personally, and I think he's going to be pretty pissed off, to say it lightly, at Aubrey. So I think luckily for Aubrey that there's a merge coming potentially very soon, so hopefully they'll make it to that together, and that won't be a big deal. But I'm interested to see how affected Joe feels by Aubrey's, I guess, betrayal in a way.
Yeah. The other thing I found interesting with Aubrey, like, she made a really good point. I think she had said it a couple of times, not just this episode, but I think she said it last week, was, she didn't trust Peter and wasn't a big fan with him, didn't have a great connection, but she was like, it's better the devil you know. But while that's a great saying, and I kind of totally understand where she's coming from, this is also a game for $1 million. Mm-hmm. And these aren't family members or boyfriends or girlfriends or brothers and sisters. These are, people from all over America coming together to play a game where you have to vote people off. And you can't really stick to the devil you know, because that devil is going to stab you in the back when they get the chance. So while I sort of appreciate it and totally understand what she was saying, I sort of thought you got to put it in the right context. You're not in real life. You're in the game of Survivor where there's 18 of you fighting for $1 million. So, I guess we'll move on to Tribal, and what do you think of Tribal and how that all played out in the end?
Well, I guess we've been talking about it a little bit, but Tribal was just, it was clear that there was a division between Peter, Aubrey and Joe, and I just feel like they gave up their power in the game. They were able to hide the division in the first 3 days that they were a new tribe, but they couldn't hide it any longer. And I think that, like we've been saying, that I don't know, I think Aubrey made the right decision for her. I still think that Joe made the right decision for him to vote against Julia. So it's something that's going to have to come out in the wash and just see how it's played. Peter, to me, he just played himself out of the game. So for me, Peter's lost it himself. Really terrific by Julia, Ty, and Scott, which we haven't talked a lot about really in the last 10 minutes. They've stood firm as three individuals not from the same original tribe. They've come from the two tribes and they've merged into one threesome, which has been really terrific. So for me, I'm really pleased that they could form a strong alliance between the three of them and make it to a point where the three brains are like, well, these three are going to sit together, they're going to go to Rog, so what are we going to do?
I mean, going into that tribal, who did you think was going to go?
Going into that tribal, that's a really good question. I don't know. I felt like Aubrey might switch because I think that she's a bit she's self-interested. So, and that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that in a negative way at all. I think that she's just looking after herself. So I felt like Peter was going to go. So I wasn't too shocked that he went in the end. But I just think it was really, really well played by Julia, Scott, and Ty just to make that core three so strong that the original three brains felt like they had no choice but for Aubrey then just to make that switch over.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you as well, what did you think about Aubrey writing down Julia's name, crossing it out, and then writing Peter's name?
I actually thought it was quite sort of funny, but maybe not the smartest of moves. I think, from an audience point of view or for a TV point of view, it was great because it threw it out there that we saw her write Julia, but she sat on it for a bit, and even the camera, the way they edited it, it looked like, it sort of sat on that vote, that parchment. And my gut feel was actually she would rip that one up and write a new one for some reason. I'm not too sure of whether they're allowed to do that.
I was going to say, are they allowed to do that?
I don't know. I think another podcast sort of brought up something similar. But again, they mustn't be allowed to. They must have to use the same parchment. That's why she's, put Julia on there and then crossed out and put Peter. Look, I don't know whether she changed her mind in that moment or she was trying to make a statement or something to say, yeah, we were voting for Julia, but I can't trust you anymore, or I can't be with you anymore. It was interesting. And look, it played out well because it was the last vote that was read as well. So that would have rubbed salt into the wound of Peter. But you're going into that tribal, I'm a bit like you. I thought Aubrey could flip, but I was thinking maybe this is just the red herring. They're trying to build up. Like, we know Julie is an obvious potential boot, so we've got to try and edit in such a way that we've got to have a couple of options on the table. So I wasn't too sure. And the way even Scott and Ty, so I said, we don't know what Aubrey's doing. Maybe we're going to have to vote Julia. So I was expecting maybe Julia to go. But then when I thought, well, if there was going to be any sort of flip, what are your thoughts about this? I actually was thinking that if it was going to be close and Aubrey was going to flip, that they'd let it go to a 3-3 tie and then she'd do the flip in the re-vote.
Yeah, to me, that's probably the line I think she was going to go, where she would vote the first time, it's 3-3, and then she makes the decision to flip over just because she doesn't want to go to Rocks. And I think that would have been better probably from a TV point of view. I thought that's probably what would have happened, but I guess she's made a clear decision early that she didn't want to go down that path. She's made it clear that maybe she had some thoughts about it, so she can go back to Joe and at least say, look, I wrote Julia's name down, but then I stopped, I thought about it. It's not best for both our games to keep Peter in. He's a cancer to our tribe. We can try and make an alliance with the other players in our tribe. So I think it leaves her with more options going back to camp, the way she voted.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I still think they've done the best thing, but I can sort of appreciate the position they were in. They wanted to try and keep their brains numbers as strong as possible going into a merge. So I totally get the whole, especially Aubrey being torn between keeping Peter, which was, again, the risky move as well. But they just got to hope, Ty and Scott and Julia stick with them. But you want to speak about a potential merge next week?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So we've seen in the adverts that it looks like a merge is going to be coming, and it's a really, I guess it's an interesting point in the game. How many are we down to now? We're down to 11? 13?
Oh, no. No, you're right.
Yeah, we're down to 11. So we're at 11, and I guess that's a good number to come in. And I just wonder, who do you think is going to be at the head of these alliances? Because we've seen multiple players think they're in charge, and we really haven't seen a lot from the Blue Tribe in the last couple of episodes, so we don't know how those relationships are going. Who are you thinking might, be at risk in this next episode?
Gee, that's the $64 million question, isn't it? I mean,
exactly.
Like you said, I mean, we didn't see anything from Sydney and Jason tonight, or episode just gone. We didn't see anything from Neil. It was very Michelle, Nick, and Debbie centric on that side of the ledger, and then obviously we saw a bit of everything on the other tribe. The dynamics moving forward, look, again, it could go any number of ways. I feel like the Brawn players are potentially in the better position, or I feel like people gravitate more towards them.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Deb went, we assume, to Sydney first, and then, Jason, and talking about, woman winning, and then obviously Jason and Sydney sort of having, chat to Nick and Michelle, and so they sort of look like they were in that sort of good position last week. But then you've got Scott that's built a really good relationship with Ty, and actually, I think he's been one of the most surprising players the last 2 weeks. I think Scott's really endeared himself to everybody, and it seems to, be pretty likable and does well in the challenges and at camp. So, he's in a really strong position for someone that's by himself on a tribe. So,
yeah,
it only takes him, Ty, and Julia to stick together, go into a marriage. Then they've got Sydney and Jason, so that's your 5, and then
plus Michelle.
Well, yeah, and then but if Michelle does come across, and then even Nick. Well, yeah, you're right. Sorry, and so that's another thing you need to think about. Yeah, Julia and Michelle are tight, so Julia potentially pulls Michelle across. So that's your 6 straight up, assuming they all want to work together. And then there's another multiple, if other people could jump in. I get the feeling, I don't want to feel like I'm stealing something from another podcast, but I had to agree with something I heard in regards to, Nick potentially being more likely to work with the Brawn members than the Brains members. And I sort of agree. I just get that vibe that he feels like he'd be more part of that group and on that wavelength that he'd probably go that way too. And I mean, if Julia and Michelle are going to be potentially aligned with Scott, I reckon Nick would probably go that way too.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this then. So at the end of the reward challenge today, we saw Scott leaving with his tribe, and as he's going out, he turns around and says something to Nick like, "Well done, mate, you kept me honest."
Yeah.
In terms of that challenge, do you think that was a precursor maybe for a relationship between Scott and Nick going further in the game?
Yeah, I think Scott's the kind of person, again, coming from that NBA background. I mean, you don't have to be an NBA player to, have this quality, but I think there's a certain level of respect you have for competition and the players you come up against. And I think, Scott's that kind of person that would respect Nick for, not the devious manipulative side of things, but just the fact that he really pushed him and sort of didn't matter that Scott was an NBA player. He had a red hot crack and almost beat him. And I think Scott has that relationship with Sydney and obviously Jason and even Jennifer he had the relationship with that. I think, there's just this really good respect. I mean, obviously he didn't have that with Alicia, but I think Scott sees, those sort of qualities in people and will respect that and find some, a bond with that person. So I think I agree with you. I think that's something, again, like there's a lot of things they put in the show that don't really mean anything, but I think you're right. They put that in there. It was said. They didn't have to edit it in there, but they left it in there. And that, you're right. It could have been just a show of respect and say, mate, well done. You pushed me and made me work for it and almost beat me. And, I respect that. And, you're right. It could be just that small little embryo to start a relationship.
Yeah, and like you're talking about embryo, so look, I agree with something you just said about 2 minutes ago about Scott, about how he's come out and I guess of his shell these last 2 episodes. I don't think that with Alicia being out of the game as well, that's not a coincidence. I think that it's nice. I said this to you off air a few times, that I think that for Scott, he was someone who was in that dynamic on that Braun tribe where he was getting drawn in a little bit. And now that he's away from that dynamic, he was able to really show and play the game the way he can play it. And I've been super impressed with Scott because, to be honest, I thought we were having another Cliff Robinson where, like, Cliff was nice, but he wasn't overly strategic. To see Scott play a strategic game as well as a social game, he's been really impressive to me.
Yeah, no, he's definitely, like, I think we've both done a 360 on him in the last few episodes. He's just really turned the corner. I think the Alicia stuff, yeah, look, maybe in hindsight it was, after being, with Alicia for 10 days, it was just broke him. And and he made some poor comments or made some poor decisions in things he said. And it is funny, like, and maybe it is a bit of a parallel to his real life. Like, I can't remember all of his NBA career, how well received he was at every team he was at. But there was obviously teams he was at that he had a good rapport with everyone and played well and was part of that team because he probably got along with the majority of people. And it only takes you to go to one team and maybe only have that one person that just rubs you the wrong way and you don't enjoy it. The morale drops and you snap. So, yeah, maybe just Alicia was like being on the wrong basketball team for a season.
Yeah, I think so.
You just can't. And now he's gone on to a new basketball team and he's loving it because he's respected in the group, but also he enjoys the people around him. And, yeah, it's like breathe new life into Scott, which I agree with you. I think he was going down the Cliff Robinson path of maybe just being another one of those people that was sort of just, again, an early sort of boot.
No, I agree, 100%.
Let's round up this episode. Well, sorry, I should say wind it up.
Wind it up.
Yeah. Who's your pick to win? Tell me.
Who is my pick to win? Well, I don't think I have a great track record because my 1-2 were Liz and Anna, and they're both gone. So
you're a sucker.
I'm sucking this year. So I know that we do this Ozlet lottery thing where we all put in $10 and we get out a random survivor. So my first boot this season was Neil, but he's still here. He's my pony. So let's go for Neil. He's got an immunity idol. Somehow he might, I don't know, make it to the end somehow.
Yeah. Well,
so
my
Neil
winner pick.
Is my winner pick. Hope.
Sorry.
He's my hope for a winner pick.
Oh, Hope. Well, who's your real? Who do you think's in the best position right now? Who do you think will win it? If I gave you $100, and in the spirit of the Good Friday and the Royal Children's Hospital appeal, if I gave you $100 to bet on someone to win from here, who are you going to put your money on?
I would put my money on. As crazy as this might sound, Debbie. I just think that she's in a really good position. I just think she's made good relationships with people. Who was she pissed off in this game? No one. She makes it to the end. She's getting votes.
Yeah, I don't know if she can win or not because
who else can win?
Yeah, you're right. No, but I'm tending to agree with you because I think she's built relationships. But I think, you know what, we think she's a bit crazy, a bit kooky, and she's got some funny stories. But I think that for them, or the players she's playing against, I think they wouldn't see her as a threat because of that.
Yeah, I agree.
She's kind of a bit eccentric, a bit kooky, a bit funny, a bit quirky. And Michelle sort of said that. She's like, I just like her. She's not... It's funny because in Michelle's confessional, she didn't sound like she was being really complimentary, but she was kind of like, I love Deb, I love her, but because she's quirky and she's this. But no one... I think she is very... kind of under the radar. She doesn't seem like she's a threat, and I just think that's where she'll get really far because you're right, once you get to the jury stage, I think she'll get a lot of votes for being, just a really good person to be around and stuff. So you're right. I mean, she's definitely up there as being a genuine chance. But
if you had asked me at the start of the game, there's how many people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people already gone. I could probably pick 4 people who are already gone who I would have as my winners pick every week, and they're already gone. So to me, I just don't know. And I just think every confessional we hear, Debbie's lovely, Debbie's this. So I just don't know if the edit is alluding that she might be the winner, and she would be a very different winner to what we're used to. But this game always throws up those quirks once in a while, and I think we might be onto one of those seasons. And plus, if we're talking about our Jeff gauge again, Jeff he likes men as winners. He's always talking up seasons that men win. He talks down seasons that women win. So for me, I don't know. It just my perception is that we might have a winner that's a woman, and maybe Debbie.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. But I'm going to have to stick with my winner pick at the start of the season was Jason. So I have to sort of stick with that. I kind of feel, I got a feeling after the Alicia stuff, he might, kind of get far, but might fall, or maybe even get to the end and not win because of his potential, perceived bullying tactics.
You know what though? Like when we're talking about Jason, like all that stuff with Alicia happened on the Brawn Beach, and there was no one else around. So I just don't know how much that will affect his game long term. But we are getting like a few sneak peeks of people who don't particularly like him. But do you think he could make it to the end and be like, I don't know, like a Russell at the end, where like people just don't like him, so they don't vote for him?
Yeah, I know what you're saying with the Alicia stuff, but I think things would filter back potentially. I can almost imagine if it was a final 2 or 3 and Sydney and Jason were there, Sydney would use that against him. Potentially, like if the question came up about your integrity or this and that, I don't know. You just never know. I think Jason I felt like he was in a good position last week, but then when you have, Deb sort of throwing his name out there saying he doesn't do anything around here, and then it cuts to a shot of him just lying in the shelter. I mean,
yeah.
He's not as rock solid as I thought he would be at the start. But again, it's highly speculative when we always pick our winners when you're just going off bios and you got to try and pick someone out of 18.
Yeah, it's tricky.
At least with a horse. Well, it's like a horse race, really. Like, you said, you mentioned ponies. It's like picking a horse but having no knowledge of all their previous runs and their track record. So
that sounds exactly how I would pick a horse.
Yes. My pony, I think, is Scott Pollard, so that's interesting. So I can't see him winning. I just think he's doing better, but I think he's just too much of a threat physically that I could see him sort of getting the boot. What are your thoughts? Actually, who do I think is really going to win? Who do I think? It's going to be weird, and I know Nick Chester will probably love that I'm going to say this because he's a fan. I think Aubrey's starting to show herself a bit, and you never know.
Aubrey.
There's something about Aubrey because I don't think, like you said, you kind of said she's taken on a bit of she's taken on a bit of a leadership in some of the challenges, and she's done all right. She hasn't blitzed them either, but she's good at a puzzle.
Yeah.
But then going back to her edit, like the fact that she struggled on day one and she was having that whole, coming from the colder environment, she was almost having a panic attack and all that sort of stuff. I don't know, like maybe, she's been quiet, but, she has a chance.
We saw that, I guess, in South Pacific with Sophie as well, where she was pretty quiet for part of the game. And Aubrey has Sophie qualities about her. So, it wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world if Aubrey won.
No. Yeah. No, I'll stick with that for now. I know we're highly debating this, aren't we? But that's what's fun. That's what's fun about. Who do you think? Who's your Smokey or your dark horse?
Sydney. Sydney's my Smokey straight away. Like, she's someone who I've liked from the very beginning. I hated her pre-game. Didn't like anything she was saying. Didn't like the way she was coming across with these multiple personalities. But she has played a really good game socially. We saw on Brawn Beach. We haven't seen a lot of her since she's been on Chan Lo, but I just like what I've seen of her. I like that she makes good social moves. I like that she makes good strategic moves. Physically, she's very strong. I do worry a little bit coming into a merge, but I think that because she is a woman, and not to be sexist, but because she is a woman, I think that usually they target more physically male-dominant players early in a merge, so I think that she might be able to sneak through. And I just think the numbers are going to be falling on her side when we were doing that breakdown before, where we could have a possible Beauty and Brawn alliance taking out those brains. So, I don't know. For me, Sydney's someone who has really surprised me this season. I've really been impressed with her. Under the radar, she's only had 11 confessionals in total this season, but I think she's someone who could come to life later in this game.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that's a really good pick. I'm going to say my dark horse is Ty. I think Ty's obviously got his idol. He seems to be pretty close to Scott, and inadvertently he doesn't know it yet. But if once a merge comes and with Jason, they're going to have two idols or a super idol. I just sort of think I think he can win, but I just don't see him winning because I think, again, who's going to take him to the end when he's so likable?
Yeah. To me, Ty's that, 4th, 5th place finisher where
like
he
a
just
Keith
doesn't.
Nail or,
he just doesn't make it. Like, lovely character, and people love him, but
and I think I feel like Scott's relationship with him is quite genuine, but I still feel like, Scott's also not stupid either. I think Ty's more likely to get used by Scott and Jason for their own benefit, not his.
Yeah.
So when it comes to a potential super idol, and there's debate on whether that'll ever happen, I wouldn't be surprised if it does get used. If those two use it, it's just I don't think they'll be thinking of Ty's best interests when it gets used. So no. And okay, so winding it up even more, who is going home next week?
This is a really tricky one. I just think that Joe might go home next week. He's someone who's been a little bit under the radar. I just feel like maybe number-wise, if I'm thinking that it's a Brawn and Beauty alliance taking out Brains, Joe's someone who, when you look at the other players in the game, Debbie's pretty likable. They can probably think they can use her. Aubrey, they might think that she has an idol. Same with Neil. So Joe is someone who I would look at and say, look, he's pretty old school. I can't imagine that he would have been looking for an idol. Let's just be safe and go for Joe. So my vote would be for Joe next week.
Well, we even heard Joe say, I think last week at Tribal, that he sort of believed there was no idols out there. So we know he's not looking, or he's ruled them out. So look, I think he's probably a safe one too. I got a feeling though. Do you reckon we have a Medivac soon again, or?
They've talked about Medivacs, and like we've had one official Medivac. We know there's been a few Medivacs post game for some of the players. I know Peter, I was listening to his exit interview today, and he said that he had to have surgery after the game. Liz clearly had surgery, and if you go look at those pictures on her Immigroo site,
so fill in our listeners and myself, because I didn't know about Peter. So I know. Yeah,
sure.
Liz, I've seen Liz's photos and the plastic surgery she had to have, and how deeply they had to cut those that infection out. Going down to going down to the bone at some places is pretty full on, and having the plastic surgery. So what happened to Peter?
I believe Peter, from what I heard this morning, was that he had an infection in his finger or in his hand, and he had quite a bad fever the time he was voted out, and post game he got out of the game. It didn't get better, and they sent him off to have surgery on his hand to get it out. So like, this season has been absolutely brutal. Like, I can't remember a season where we've had so many. Like, we're talking about this like pre-merge trip. Like, who's on the pre-merge trip? Maybe like Darnell, Jennifer, like Alicia. That might be about it. So
Jennifer had the ear.
Jennifer, yeah. So they've all had a few issues. So I don't know.
Isn't it funny that, like, I mean, obviously we hear, there was other seasons where players have had stuff and we don't really hear about it because it didn't happen on the show, or it happened afterwards when the doctors had done the checks. I know one of the famous ones was Daniel Liu had malaria out of the Amazon.
Yeah.
So we don't always hear that stuff. It's not until, you have Rob has a podcast, the Survivor Oz, and we get to meet and talk to these players and we find out more of the backstory. But I guess it would have been hard to quickly move Second Chances Cambodia away to somewhere else. But are you surprised that if it's had sort of so many issues out of all the seasons they've ever sort of done, that they would have another season back there?
Yeah, well, look, they've done back-to-back, and I think just from production-wise, I think they're just locked into where they are for those two. It takes a lot of time to do pre-establishment of like locations, scouting locations. Look, if you don't want to know a spoiler of where they're going to be filming 33 and 34, listen away now for about a minute, and there's a break. And look, they're going to Fiji for the next 2 seasons, so like they've deliberately chosen Fiji because it's a place where they've been before. They know that the climate is quite good. They're filming last time they filmed on the northwest side of the island. They're actually filming just on the east side, just out of Nandi. I was actually in Fiji last year, so I know the islands they're going to. Lovely, ocean's excellent, so it's a pretty nice climate to go into. So I think that from a production point of view, they've looked for a location for these upcoming seasons that's going to be a lot nicer than they were before. But yeah, it's one of those things. You make a choice, you go to Cambodia. It's pretty much really difficult, and you make those choices. So yeah. I don't know. I think that the upcoming seasons, they've just got to choose places that are maybe more conducive to the contestants. Yeah. But some of these places you just can't play.
Yeah, I totally agree. It would have been too hard, probably even financially, like you said. They would have locked themselves in to do back-to-back seasons, no matter what happened this season. What happened, they probably would have been locked in and financially set up to do back-to-back seasons. But having said that, there's a part of me, again, like we talked about before with this whole litigious type thing that happens now in insurance and people getting injured and stuff like that. I'm just surprised that, with second chances and bringing back some epic characters that they've had in Survivor before, you'd sort of err on the side of caution and go, you know what, let's lock these guys in and let's, put it off for a month or two and get back to Fiji or Samoa or somewhere we know, because too many players have walked off, the shores of Cambodia with infections and injuries and stuff like that. I just sort of, we haven't seen the whole picture yet, but I don't know. I personally would have thought they would have. The last thing you want is someone dying, really.
Yeah.
So,
well, wasn't this the location? Like Kaoh Rong was a location of, was it French Survivor?
Yeah,
or
and he was a fit
Yeah.
guy too, and it was only like the third day, I think, and either just after or just before a challenge. So yeah.
It's difficult to know. Like they've chosen this location, it hasn't been great. So hopefully the next season we know where they're going now. So it'll be a lot nicer. Like I said, I was in Fiji around this time last year, so I think they're filming soonish. So I went in April last year. It's a great time of year to go, so they should be fine. But look, it's one of those things where they make a decision, they got to stick to it, I guess.
So I threw it out to some listeners to try and get some questions, and you can see that I did really well because I had to actually ask some friends for questions, and I sort of thought about it, and I thought, wow, Nick had such a big episode, and he's been called Purple Nick for a while now. So I thought I'll hit up my old friend Purple Kelly for a question to throw at us, right?
This will be good.
Yes. So I think it was a bit late at night, and I don't know how much he had to drink. And I don't even know if she was drinking, but she just said, my question is, how do you embrace the suck? Now, and then I'm like, what? And then she's like, yeah. And she goes, how does one embrace the suck? And then she said, asked by the individual who milks her own milk. So I just had to laugh, and I'm like, I am going to say that on air. And she's like, oh, no, don't. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to say it now. So, yeah, I don't even know what that means. Maybe I'm getting too old, and it's just a new part of pop culture that I don't know about. But, yeah, so we didn't get any real questions. But, yeah, it's...
So, just on that note, if you are listening to these episodes, I know Colin was talking about this as well. If you are listening to these episodes, just hit us up on the website at www.survivoroz.com, and there's always a post with the Ozlet recap episode there, or on the Facebook page or on Twitter. I know that we're definitely there to listen to questions, and this episode, the whole concept of the Ozlet show was to get listeners engaged, and I think actually next week, Cable, that we're actually going to have a special guest from a listener who's going to be coming onto the show, so that might be a bit different next week.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
And I
spoiler alert.
I thought we just like talking Survivor and recording it so people could listen.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, yeah, no, absolutely agree with what all the stuff you just said, Ryan. We need to have feedback. It'd be great. If people are not listening, they're not listening. But if you think we're okay, tell us.
You know what? They can do Cable. They can find me. They can tag Survivor Oz. They can find me at YesRyanB on Twitter. And they can tell me how I can embrace the suck, so I can find out how to embrace the suck.
Yeah, I'm going to have to Google it, I think. I'm going to have to Google it, and we're going to have to have our own episode. And you know what? If the timing had been better, we could have even had Purple Kelly on. But you know, she's got to get her beauty sleep. You know, they all do.
Unfortunately, we're recording this on Good Friday night Australian time, and most Americans are
asleep.
They might be waking up, but most will be still sleeping.
Yeah. So no, but I thought it was just appropriate. I thought, who can I annoy for a question? And I thought, no, I'll hit Purple Kelly up because I know Nick has been referred to as getting the purple edit so far, but Julie's probably in that boat too. But
Julia's definitely in it. She's worse than purple.
So there you have it, people. If you've listened in, thank you very much. That's what we want. That's what we're here for. Me and Ryan could talk Survivor for hours upon hours upon hours, just like my old modelling career that I've done for years and years. We'd love to hear your feedback, and thanks for being on with me, Ryan. Otherwise, this would have been a one-man show.
No, I'm happy to be here. Unfortunately, our wives are probably both thinking, what the hell have we done for the last hour and a half?
Yes, almost 2 hours.
Almost 2 hours. No, it was really good. I appreciate having me on, and fantastic to make my debut episode on a Ozlet recap episode, which is terrific.
Yeah, and for the people out there, please give me feedback if you think I'm a terrible host. It was the first time I've done this, so yeah, I got a little bit lost, and I'm so used to Ryan or Colin or Noah or Ben ask me questions. So
you did fine. Look, I do some recap episodes, and I think someone said me, I'm not trying to rip off Ben. Ben's excellent. Like, compared to Ben, we're still just practicing. Like, he's the pro.
Yeah. We can just set the agenda. That's, I guess, the difference. All right. Thank you, Ryan. And I guess if you listen to us, please give us some feedback. We want to hear good, bad, and the ugly. That's out from us.